Hey everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the Inclusioneer Lab, where we talk about the fusion of design, guest experience, and innovation. Last season was amazing, and we had some really awesome guests, and this year's going to be even better. We have some fantastic people lined up to talk to. We have some amazing things to talk about. And I have a special announcement coming up in a future episode about what's been cooking in the lab. So if you're enjoying this content, if you enjoyed last season and are excited for this season, do me a favor, click that like button and hit subscribe. It really helps our viewership. It really helps our algorithm on YouTube. I'm not ashamed to say that. We need all the help we can get so we can get this content out to as many people as possible. I am so glad that you're here, and I just wanted to take a minute to remind you of how this all started because I think it's so important, and that's why I'm wearing this Walt Disney shirt today. If we remember back to the 50s and 60s, when Walt Disney was developing Disneyland and Disney World, he had the Imagineers, right? These were amazing folks that were an incubator of ideas, an amazing um, think tank of thought and interesting things. And that's what I'm trying to do here at the Inclusioneer Lab. So thanks again for joining us. I thought I would start this season off by doing something a little different. A few months ago, some of you may have been on, I ran a webinar specifically towards independent hotels. You know, when I think about independent hotels, I think this is probably one market that can benefit from the thoughts and the concepts behind the Inclusioneer Lab and the Inclusioneer framework that I talk about so often. And so I wanted to really speak directly to the audience. So I wanted to do something a little different today for this first episode. A few months ago, I ran a webinar for independent and boutique properties because I think there's a missing piece here, and that's OTA dependency and the loyalty gap that exists with these smaller independent properties. And that was more of a Able2Global focused sales presentation. What I wanted to do today is take that and really turn this into a lab experiment, a brainstorming session, and view it through the lens of the Inclusioneer framework. So for those of you that may not have seen our season last year, the framework really revolves around three pillars, which I will go into in just a moment in more detail, but it's design that includes, hospitality that elevates, and systems that scale. And so I wanted to run through this webinar with you and really view this again as an experiment or see how this applies to the framework that we've developed. So I've got my slides pulled up here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to go through these, and if not, I'll try to describe them in enough detail that if you're listening on Spotify or another platform, you can get the gist of what we're talking about. But make sure to check this out on YouTube as well. So the talk I did just a few months ago was the independent hotel revenue leak, 3 drips, 1 fix. And this is a really interesting take that I haven't seen anyone take before, and I'm excited to share it with a larger audience today. All right, so let's hop right in. Let's be honest, you didn't get into hospitality to fight the algorithms, right? You probably got into hospitality because of images like we see on the left-hand side of your screen. Opulent lobbies, awesome guest experience, and the want and desire to serve your fellow human beings. But if we're being honest, I'm sure you end up in rooms like the one on the right more often than you do talking to your guests in your lobby. On the right here, imagine burning the midnight oil, crunching the numbers, looking at things like P&L statements and um, you know, revenue statements, and worrying about things like staffing concerns, staff training, all of these things. I bet that's not why you got into hospitality in the first place. So that got me thinking, how can we help hotel owners and operators get back to the things that they love? And it made me think about the average independent or boutique property. So I just want to kind of boil this down. Imagine you have a 100-room property hotel. Your occupancy rate is 70%, and your average daily rate is $200. That's $5.1 million in annual revenue. That sounds pretty good, right? Well, hold on a second, because we have to kind of think about this and break it down. In talking to so many of you, the biggest concern you have is your reliance on OTAs, third party booking websites like hotels.com and Expedia. And so I went and did my own research. What does a average independent or boutique property, how much do they rely on OTAs? The number astounded me. 61% of OTA of the number astounded me. 61% of independent property bookings come through OTAs like hotels.com or Expedia. And when you look at the commission rate that you're paying to get on these websites, it's anywhere between 20% and 30%, sometimes higher. Let's just take the average here and say 25%. So we were just talking a moment ago about $5.1 million in annual revenue. Right off the bat, you're taking away nearly $775,000 $775,000 plus just to pay your OTA commissions. And let's be honest, this is what your average OTA website looks like. Your beautiful property, all the wonderful amenities that you offer, your exceptional menu, your in the restaurant, your wonderful spa offerings get squashed down to a thumbnail. And a lot of times it's a thumbnail of a room, a generic looking room, right? There's only so much you can show in a thumbnail. And what does an average guest do when they're on the Expedias of the world? The first thing they do is sort by price. And so you're competing with larger chains like Marriott and Hyatt on price. What this results in is ADR erosion. If we look at this, it boils down to about 12%, believe it or not, in ADR reduction. That costs you another $200,000 a year in lost revenue. And the third drip I want to talk about here is something that we might not be able to put an actual monetary number to, but it's the loyalty programs that you are up against as an independent hotel. Marriott alone has 210 loyalty members for their Bonvoy program. You can't compete with that. And so what ends up happening is people go after points, right? These travelers go after loyalty points that, let's be honest, they might never use. But the result is that they end up booking repeatedly at 42%, while you, as an independent hotel, are struggling at just an 18% repeat booking rate. We can fix that, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So let's take a moment just to review. Drip number one is that OTA commissions, right? You're paying $750,000 in OTA commissions. for nothing to list your website, to list your property on a website. And for that, you get the privilege of paying 25% off the top. The second drip we just talked about is that price erosion of your ADR. That's costing you another $200,000. Just because you're competing on price, nobody knows about the wonderful amenities that you have to offer. And the third drip, you're struggling to find a loyal base of customers, ones that come back to you time and time again. So, total all that up, we're talking nearly $1 million in lost annual revenue. That's 20% of your $5.1 million that, in revenue that we talked about at the beginning of this episode. And it's after payroll, it's after utilities, after you pay your mortgage, and all the other expenses that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. We're eating away at all that revenue you've booked. So, if you are an independent hotel operator or owner, maybe a GM, just think with me for a minute. Where does your OTA dependency rate actually sit? Is it at that 61%? Maybe it's a little lower, maybe it's a little higher, but either way, the struggle is real. But what if there was a guest that never wanted to go to Expedia in the first place? This guest books direct 73% of the time. They have a repeat booking rate of 30+%. And they represent a market that is over $100 billion. Yes, I'm talking billion with a B. You probably never heard about this market because nobody's ever showed it to you. But if you followed me for any amount of time, you probably know who I'm talking about here. That's right, I'm talking about the accessible travel market. 61 million Americans today have a disability. And we're not even talking about the aging population. We're not even talking about people with temporary disabilities. 61 million Americans. They travel in larger groups. They stay longer. They spend more per trip. And they book 45 days out. That's vastly different than your average guest that you're currently seeing at your hotel. I can guarantee it. Again, I want to go back to that direct booking rate. 73%. Think about the 61% OTAs we talked about earlier on, right? If you look at the inverse of that, that's 39% direct booking rate. This market, disabled guests book at nearly twice the rate, 73% of the time. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, if this is such a big untapped market, why isn't anyone doing this? And it's a good question, and it deserves to be answered. Well, I think one of the biggest reasons is they simply don't know. This is not a market that has been revealed to them yet. I think also a lot of times when we think about accessibility in travel, we view it through a lens of compliance, not opportunity or competitive advantage. The third thing is that a lot of the independent owners and operators I talk to assume that when I come to talk to them about this market, I'm talking about major renovations. I can't even tell you how many times I've talked to people that say, Mike, this is really great, but come back and see me in 2030 when we have the CapEx budget to actually deal with this. I have to remind them that no, we can do something about this today and start increasing your direct booking percentages almost immediately. The last thing, and this is where I want to stay for a minute, is no one has ever shown them how to do this. A step-by-step plan to implement a framework to make this work. That's where the Inclusioneer framework comes into play. Design that includes, hospitality that elevates, and systems that scale. I want to take a minute just to kind of review these pillars again. If you've followed me in the past, you're probably aware that I talk about this all the time, but I think it's a really important reminder to kind of go through here. Pillar one, design that includes. I think one thing that the industry gets wrong is that they think of ADA compliance as the ceiling. Really, it's the floor, not the ceiling. When we're designing, we have to actually ask ourselves, does this work for real guests? Because the truth is, when we design for the margins, everyone wins. So a little touch up here or there, a little enhancement here or there can make a huge impact, not just for the disabled community, but for moms with strollers or the staff that are carrying luggage through a crowded lobby, all these things. And we're talking about minimal changes that make a maximum impact. The second pillar here is hospitality that elevates. If you go back to season 1 of this podcast, I talked about why I got into this in the first place, and I'll probably cover that again at some point here. But the reason I got started in the accessibility world, and specifically in hospitality, is because I was stuck on a cruise ship for 24 hours by myself. They didn't have a way for me to get off the actual ship. And that day I realized something really important. The problem isn't empathy, it's execution. Everyone cared, but nobody knew what to do. What we do is we take moments of exception and turn them into exceptional moments by working with your staff to deal with every unique instance that comes up. This isn't rocket science. It's not something that takes hours of training. A lot of times it's common sense and preparation that makes all the difference in the world. And that's where pillar 3 comes into play. Systems that scale. When we prepare ahead of time, we're not doing things in reaction. What I like to do with my clients is build a custom system for your property. We get in the trenches with you and we figure out ways to make things better. But what is a system without an operating system, right? Well, I am so proud to be partnering with Welcome, a wonderful company that has an operating system that really brings the Inclusioneer framework to life. So you're probably thinking, all right, Mike, this sounds great in theory, but is it for real? Is this actually a thing? The answer is yes. And I want to introduce you to the Hotel Brooklyn in Manchester, England. They saw accessibility as a competitive advantage and they did something about it. And the results are pretty staggering. They saw a year 1 revenue increase of nearly $275,000. Their RevPAR jumped by an average of 8 to 12% for disabled guests. And they've seen a repeat booking rate for disabled guests of 34%. Remember back to the beginning of this presentation? That's twice as high as the average independent hotel at 18% repeat bookings. This works. And so I want to just take a minute. Again, I don't want to make this sales pitchy. I'm going to turn off my screen here for just a minute. I want to just talk to you for a second. The opportunity is real. There's a market that is asking for this. They don't want the OTA experience. They want a bespoke, direct booking experience to make sure that their needs are met. That's why I'm here. I can help with that. So if this is interesting to you, please contact me. My information is below in this in the description of this episode, or you can always reach me at mike@able2global.com. That's Mike at able2global.com. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to bringing you more amazing content this season. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to this page. It helps me a bunch. But until next time, this is Mike Clapper for the Inclusioneer Lab, and I'm signing off. Thank you.